Hello, once again. Today I will share with you on Christocentric Season 2. Christocentric Season 2, Part 2. Christ-centered. The whole Bible is Christ-centered. The whole Bible talks of one man and one message about a man Christ. Now, Christ in the Old and New Covenants. That's my topic. Christ in the Old and the New Covenants. Christ is in both covenants. Christ is seen in the Old Testament and he is also seen in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, the prophets were prophesying about Christ. All of them, all the prophets, living in different places and living different times, God inspired to write about Christ who would come. The message was on 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 10 to 12. The message was about the coming of the Messiah, his sufferings, and the glory that would follow. But as they were prophesying, they did not understand. They were searching, trying to find out when this thing would happen. Thus, in the Old Testament, the prophets were talking about Christ's coming, his sufferings, and the glory that would follow. And the Old Testament, Genesis to Malachi, is what we call the scriptures. And from Matthew to Revelations is what we call the revelation of Christ. The revelation of Christ. So they were prophesying about his coming, each and every one of them. And they were prophesying in bits and pieces. But the main prophets who got the revelation of Christ were Isaiah and David. David in the Psalms and Isaiah. In fact, David is the one who tells us what was happening to Jesus when he died. Because as he went to hell 3 days, 3 nights, David tells us that he was praying, quoting Psalms 10, verse 16, where he says, "You will not allow my soul to remain in hell, and you will not allow my body to see corruption." He was suffering in hell, but praying, quoting scriptures or quoting David. And so, the Old Testament is Genesis to Malachi. They were all prophesying about his coming. Galatians 4:4, when the time was full, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law. So all the gospels were still under the law. Jesus came during the time of the law. Because there is no covenant which can work without blood. Jesus had not yet died. And so he had come, number one, to fulfill the law and to fulfill the prophecy to actually fulfill what the prophets were prophesying. He also had come to pay sin and death. Sin was demanding death. And then Jesus paid death by death on behalf of men. So he came to be one sacrifice for all generations. And that one sacrifice for all times. One sacrifice for all generations. That one sacrifice for all times. What is all times? All times is yesterday, today, and forever. The moment you believe, you are forgiven eternally. You are forgiven eternally. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 12. And when he rose from the dead, he appeared before God on behalf of us. And that's why when we go before God, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 18, we go before God through the Spirit. And we have free access. We have free access. We go before God because Jesus appeared before God on behalf of us. Not only that, Hebrews 7:25, Jesus is a man in heaven. Jesus is a man in heaven. Hebrews 7:25 says, he lives to intercede for our sins because he has saved us to the uttermost. He has saved us eternally. He makes sure that no one is lost. And that's why his present job is to intercede for our daily sins. We sin before God through our eyes, through our thoughts, through our speaking, through our actions. Every minute we are sinning against God. But thank God, he is sitting on the right hand of the Father as an advocate and as an intercessor. He lives to intercede for us. So, Old Testament, Christ is concealed. He is a mystery. Old Testament, Christ is concealed, is a mystery. And New Testament, Christ is revealed, unlocked. The New Testament unlocks the mystery. The New Testament was pulled out of the Old Testament. The New Testament was revealed out of the Old Testament. As they were writing, the New Testament writers, they were having revelation from the Old Testament. And that's why it is quoted. They would write and quote the Old Testament. The New Testament is the revelation of the Old Testament. John 5:39, Jesus said to the people, these scriptures are they which talk about me. I am the one whom the scriptures were talking about. The whole Bible is talking about Christ. The whole Bible is talking about Christ. When you are reading scriptures, the scriptures or the Bible is not God. But the Bible talks about the God who is inside you if a believer. And who is available all over if you want him to enter inside you. So the Bible is the mind of God which reveals Christ, who is a man who is omniscient, omnipresent. So, Luke 24, verse 27. Luke 24, verse 27. Jesus, he met two disciples coming from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They were talking about Jesus, and he appeared between them. And they were talking about Jesus. And when he asked what they were talking about. They did not realize it was him. And he actually started to explain to them, starting from Moses to Malachi. And he was talking about the things concerning himself. Genesis to Malachi are the things which were talked about Jesus Christ. His coming, sufferings, and the glory that would follow. The glory is now the birth of sons of God. The purpose of the coming of Christ is to give birth to sons of God. After destroying sin, after destroying death, after stripping the devil of his power, he then became a life-giving spirit. After his resurrection, he became a life-giving spirit. And he is busy giving birth to sons of God. So he explained to them. And again, Luke 24, verse 47. He appeared amongst the disciples, the 11 disciples. And he again explained to them, beginning from Moses, the prophets, and the Psalm, the whole Old Testament. He explained to them about the things concerning Jesus. He says, these are the things that I was talking about you when I was with you, that I had to suffer and then resurrect on the third day. And this is when he spent 40 days teaching them after he had given them understanding. You know, you cannot understand the things of God unless he gives you the mind of God, or unless he enters into you or open up your mind so that you may know him. We know him through his spirit. We know him through his spirit, because it is his spirit who wrote the Bible using humans. It is him again who gives the understanding of what he wrote. Unless you have the mind of God, you can learn the Bible as theology, and you will have a misunderstanding. And when you don't understand it, it doesn't help. And therefore, the gospel is the message of the Old Testament and the New Testament. The gospel is the message of the New Testament and the Old Testament. Romans 1:16, I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation. 1 Corinthians 1:18, I am not ashamed. It says, the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us it is power. The gospel is the work of the cross and its power. The gospel, 1 Corinthians 2:2, Paul says, I desire to know nothing except Christ and him crucified. Why do I desire to know nothing except Christ and him crucified? Because this is power. This message is power. The message is power to save. The message is power to heal. The message is power for spiritual riches. God bless you.